We'll stay with that issue because after being jilted at the altar this week in Canada, it seems that Anthony Albanese will try again to secure an audience with the US President, not in September when we know he's in New York for the UN meeting, but most likely by attending next week's NATO summit in the Netherlands. So this Trump meeting must really be getting urgent because last week the PM tried to downplay talk. It was even on the agenda. It was in his diary and then it wasn't. And now he's ready to cross the globe twice to make it happen. But if he chooses to go to NATO, you would want to be sure, wouldn't you, that the meeting would actually come off. I mean, what if Albanese landed at The Hague and then Trump pulled out of the NATO meeting? Yikes. I mean, bad enough to be snubbed once, but that would be pretty hard to explain or recover from being dumped twice by your closest ally. And therein lies the real problem. It should never have got to this. An Australian Prime Minister schlepping around the world in the hope of getting his first face-to-face meeting with the US President in the margins, literally in the corridors of an international convention. Now, not only is it demeaning to us as a nation, but it raises the question, why the PM's reluctance just to get on a plane and go to Washington as opposed to this diplomatic equivalent of stalking the world's most powerful man? Now, honestly, what's wrong with making a trip to DC for the sole purpose of establishing a personal rapport with the leader of our most important ally? I mean, it's not as if Anthony Albanese hates to travel. It's not like he doesn't like hobnobbing with celebrities. I mean, no PM has been abroad as often. And there isn't a grand final or a sellout event that the PM won't attend, provided, of course, it's got a lot of cameras and not much thought. So why the Washington reluctance? After all, he thought of nothing to visit the Pope visit Rome for the Pope's installation. But the Pope's not as skerrick of the importance to Australia, at least in practical terms, as the US President is. So what's Anthony Albanese's aversion to Washington and the Oval Office then? Well, back in 2017, when he was a mere Labor frontbencher and Donald Trump was in his first term, Anthony Albanese couldn't help but pour scorn on the US President.
We have an alliance with the US, we've got to deal with him, but that doesn't mean that you're uncritical about it. He scares the shit out of me.
At the time, it was assumed that this was just the left-standard Trump derangement syndrome that had him spooked. Now, maybe it was. Maybe it is true now. Maybe he's actually intimidated. Trump is, as we know, unpredictable, and Albanese isn't exactly known for his ability to think fast on his feet. Maybe it's his minders who are scared witless of a Zelensky-style dressing down in the Oval Office. Or maybe because a dressing down he could very easily get, given his own disparaging comments about Trump, the sneering from others like Rudd and Penny Wong, plus his government's almost pathological aversion to raising defence spending despite our increased strategic danger. Maybe that's it. Perhaps he thinks that a meeting on the sidelines of something else would be brief and that Trump would be distracted anyway. I doubt it. Maybe he's worried that Donald Trump might ask him to explain why Australia's energy policy is making us ever more dependent on Chinese solar panels and wind turbines. That he might ask us, why the heck are we still in Paris? And why are we making ourselves weaker and weaker by refusing to even look at nuclear power? Maybe. Overwhelmingly, I think he's petrified about being pushed on defence spending by our largest ally and not being able to provide a plausible answer as to why Australia expects the US sons and daughters to put their lives on the line to defend us, if necessary, and yet we can't even lift our military spending to help ourselves. And he's right to worry because there's nothing he can say, really, that stacks up. Indeed, he should take a lesson out of Keir Starmer's book, who took a rocky relationship with Trump and turned it around. Now, let's not forget the British Labor Party sent dozens and dozens of staffers to help the Biden campaign. But after Trump won, Starmer earned his absolution by fronting up to the Oval Office back in February, behaving like an adult and offering up as a measure of goodwill an increase in British defence spending to 3% of GDP that was long overdue. Because it's not just getting the meeting that matters, it's what you do and say in it that counts. To get anywhere with the US right now, Australia needs to demonstrate that we are an ally that pulls our weight. Otherwise, any meeting is a disaster whenever and wherever it takes place. Of course, there's another possible explanation for the PM's aversion to having a serious sit-down with the President as opposed to a brush past in a corridor. Maybe this lifelong leftist and instinctive anti-nuclear activist wouldn't really mind if AUKUS failed, especially if he could blame someone else for being unreasonable, because AUKUS is very inconvenient for Labor, because AUKUS's nuclear submarines program makes a mockery of Labor's rejection of nuclear power. And this is why many inside Albanese's left faction want AUKUS to fail. But one thing is for sure, the longer their first meeting's delayed, and right now the PM's about the only G20 leader who has not met with Trump in the 7 months or so since he was elected, the longer it's delayed, the more significant that meeting will become when it happens, and the more pressure there will be on our Prime Minister. Now, I think Australia's weaker stance on Israel is also a factor here, that our votes against Israel and the US position at the UN have made it more difficult for us. And the fact too that in our recent election campaign, so much of Labor's attack against Peter Dutton was about fitting him up as a Southern Hemisphere Trump. Now, there's a saying that all politics is personal, and that's been my observation of leaders close up. There's a lot in that saying. Now, the problem here is that our Prime Minister has made his attacks on Trump very personal. And now that he needs him, he's finding Trump's memory is about on par with his ego.